My mother once said something to me over breakfast, her voice as soft as the steam rising from her mug. Not everyone is meant to be exceptional, Emma, and that's okay. Someone has to support the stars. I was 19, freshly commissioned, my uniform still stiff with starch and pride. I don't think she meant to hurt me, at least I hope she didn't, but that sentence cut through me like a whispering blade. From that moment on, it became the quiet soundtrack of my life. Every holiday, every visit home, I heard it again, not in words, but in glances, in small dismissals, in how they leaned toward my sister Madison, like she carried all the light in the room. Madison was the family's golden one, brilliant, composed, and perfectly on track with the military life my parents revered. And me, I was the one who strayed, the girl they whispered about, the one who couldn't handle it. They never said I was a failure outright, but silence has a way of speaking louder than judgment. I don't think my mother meant malice. She spoke what she thought was truth. But I learned early that in our family, greatness wasn't measured by quiet courage or unseen service. It was measured in medals, framed photos, and mentions in promotion speeches. I had none of that. I had shadows. I had missions no one was allowed to mention. I had presence wrapped in invisibility. And for years, I quietly wondered, was I wrong to walk away from the path they paved? Was I the disappointment they thought of every time they talked about the one who couldn't finish? I used to think that even if I wasn't Madison, even if I wasn't the favorite, I was still their daughter. At the very least, they'd remember I was out there serving the country, surviving in places the nightly news wouldn't dare name. But sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from the battlefield, they come from the dinner table at home. When I returned from a deployment near the Eastern European border, I texted a week ahead. No reply. I landed back in Kentucky, uniform still dusty from desert wind, duffel bag threatening to burst. No one met me. I called my dad. He said, "You're always so busy. We figured you weren't coming." Like I'd missed a dentist appointment not 7 months under fire. I half laughed, half choked, then grabbed an Uber home. That night was Thanksgiving. The house was packed, cousins, neighbors, even Madison's friend's friend. But when I walked in, there was no name card for me. The seat that used to be mine by the window had been given to the neighbor's son because he just got into law school. My mother whispered, "You don't mind standing, do you?" We ran out of chairs, so I stood, still wearing my gloves. I ate mashed potatoes by the sink while laughter and congratulations filled the room. My medals were still packed in a box in the garage, never once hung up. I wasn't asking for applause. I just wanted a chair, a place, a hello. But even that was too much. That night I watched from the window as Madison laughed with young officers, the ones my parents called the future of the military. And me, I was the quiet shadow in my own home. That night I whispered a promise to myself, I'm done chasing approval. I don't need it anymore. All my life, my family only referred to me as the one who dropped out of West Point. They said it quietly with that soft disappointment that cuts deeper than yelling. Not once did they ask why I left. Maybe they didn't want the truth. Maybe it didn't fit the story they needed to believe. The truth is, I didn't drop out. I was pulled. Late one night after my first year, I was summoned to an office I'd never entered before. A senior officer looked at me and said, "We've been watching you. You have certain skills we can't train, but we need." I was offered a position in a strategic intelligence program, covert, off the books. No graduation ceremony, no diploma. Just forged documents, classified missions, and one-way tickets to places that don't exist on civilian maps. From that moment on, I vanished. Not because I forgot my family, but because I wasn't allowed to exist in their world anymore. I still sent birthday flowers to Mom, Christmas cards to Dad, postmarked from a fake Maryland address. I watched my brother's wedding live-streamed from the base chapel. I saw Madison get decorated in uniform, while my name remained unspoken. Once a cousin sent me a family photo. I remembered that day 2004 shortly after I left West Point. I used to be in that picture, but I'd been cropped out. He said it was to balance the frame. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because for once they were honest. They said I quit because I couldn't handle the rigor. But they didn't know I spent 6 months embedded in Damascus. That I once hid in the walls of a Libyan prison camp, coordinating the rescue of 30 civilians. That I lost 3 teammates on Operation Candlelight, and a piece of myself I've never recovered. I didn't go home, but I didn't vanish. I didn't fail. I just wasn't the kind of success they could frame on the living room wall. The call came on a crisp fall morning. I was stationed at a temporary ops center in Virginia when my phone buzzed. It was my mother. Her voice as always measured flat clinical, like she was reading a lab result not speaking to her daughter. Madison's getting promoted. You should come. Just don't wear anything weird. Don't make her look bad. No, we miss you. No, it'd be nice to have you home. Just instructions delivered like a memo. I didn't argue. I simply said, okay, I'll be there. Not because I expected a welcome. Not because I thought there'd be hugs or pride. I agreed for one reason only, to see if just once they could truly see me. Not the version they erased. The real me. The night before I left, I stood in front of my closet. Tucked deep in the back was my old dress uniform, crisp, pressed untouched. I'd never worn it to a ceremony. Never had the moment. I pulled it out and placed it in my suitcase. Next to it, I laid a simple outfit, a soft cream blouse and neutral slacks. Nothing bold, nothing demanding attention. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face wasn't young anymore, but not old either. Just marked by too many desert dawns and too many late nights staring at satellite maps. My eyes had grown sharper, my mouth more still, but my posture West Point had made sure that never wavered. I whispered to the glass, "It's time." I didn't know if I meant time to forgive or time to let silence finally speak. I arrived at Fort Ridley right on time. Not early, not late. No one was waiting at the gate. No hugs from Mom. No nod from Dad. The security guard glanced at my ID and waved me through like I was just another civilian guest. The VIP parking lot was full gleaming SUVs and government plates everywhere. I parked by the logistics fence where the gravel crunched under my boots. At least the ground remembered who I was. The house looked the same, beige paint, that old porch swing, the flag swaying like time hadn't touched it. But I had changed. I stepped inside carrying the quiet weight of years erased. Mom was placing name cards on the dining table. Without looking up, she said, "Go change your shirt. You and Madison will sit together, and please don't interrupt her speech. No, glad you're here." No mention of the 10-hour drive I'd just made. Dad greeted me like an officer would greet someone about to retire early. A stiff pat on the back, a nod. "You made it." His eyes slid past me like I was housekeeping. Then Madison made her entrance flawless in dress blues, ribbons aligned like art charm radiating from every step. She saw me and waved half-hearted. "This is my sister. She used to be in the military. For a while. Now she works in admin, I think." There was polite laughter, the kind that cuts sharper because no one thinks it's cruel. A cousin leaned over, whispered, "VA office." "Huh. Better than nothing, right?" I smiled just enough to end the conversation. No teeth, no reply. There's a dignity in silence, especially when your truth is classified. The walls were covered in framed photos, graduations, medals, formal dinners. None of them included me. The last one with me in it was from 2004. They'd cropped me out later to balance the frame. A little niece tugged my hand. "Did you ever shoot a real gun?" she asked. I crouched down and smiled. "Sweetheart, I once wrote a plan that helped 30 soldiers make it home alive. That's better than any shot I've ever taken." She blinked, then ran off to play. And I stood there surrounded by people who thought they knew who I was. The next morning was Madison's official promotion ceremony. The hall at Fort Ridley gleamed rows of perfectly aligned chairs, polished brass fixtures, and rank badges that seemed to glow under the overhead lights. I was placed in the third row from the back, wedged between a junior officer's fiancé and an overly perfumed great-aunt. Our row had a small white sign family, unassigned. A bureaucratic way of saying you're present, but you don't really belong. Madison stood at the podium spotlighted like it was her coronation. She spoke of honor duty discipline. Then with a poised sharpness she dropped this line. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is distance yourself from those who once betrayed the sacred trust of the uniform. I didn't react. You get used to being hit by words that aren't said directly, but still draw blood. When she mentioned me only as a family member in attendance, I saw a few heads turn. One officer leaned over and whispered, "She looks familiar." Where have I seen her before? I kept my gaze forward, my spine straight. That's when General Graham walked in. He didn't need to announce himself. The room instinctively straightened the moment he entered. He scanned the crowd, then locked eyes with me. A pause. Then he strode directly toward my seat. His boots clicked sharply as he stopped beside me. He raised his hand in a crisp salute. "Ma'am," he said clearly. "General Emma Walsh. An honor to see you again." The room froze. I rose not because I needed validation, but because I would never let a man who once trusted me with lives stand alone in respect. From the corner of my eye, I saw my mother drop her water glass. My father stood halfway, then slowly sat back down, unsure where to look. Madison's hand trembled. Her voice cracked. And in that moment, I knew the center of gravity in that room had shifted. That night after the ceremony, I didn't stay for the family gathering. I returned to my temporary quarters on base beige walls, a buzzing bedside lamp, and a bed as stiff as the silence I'd grown used to. On the desk sat a plain manila envelope. No name, no handwriting. It sat there like it had been waiting. I opened it. Inside was a scanned email forwarded through an encrypted relay server. Subject line, Operation Breach. Civilian casualties. It accused me, said I had commanded an unsanctioned mission that led to civilian deaths. It referenced a redacted report and claimed to have sent it to a fringe military blog for exposure. I read the words with a strange sense of déjà vu because I recognized them. The phrasing came directly from a classified after-action report I had once reviewed in a bunker in Germany. That report was seen by exactly 3 people, myself, a lead analyst, and 1 junior officer with peripheral clearance, Madison. The dates matched the time I was suddenly flagged for an internal audit, a supposed automated anomaly quickly dismissed. But someone had made sure the smoke lingered long after the fire was out. I didn't confront her in rage. I took the envelope to the reception hall, waited until she stepped outside to take a call. I held up the page. "Did you send this no accusation? Just the question?" She looked at it, hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." I asked why. Her shoulders sagged like strings had been cut. "Because you weren't supposed to win. You left. You didn't stay and build. You don't get to come back and still matter more." She didn't cry, but her voice cracked. And in that moment, I didn't see Madison the officer. I saw Madison the little sister, the one who used to trail behind me begging to be included. And now? She had tried to erase me. Not out of hatred, but out of desperation to be seen. I couldn't sleep that night. Not from rage, but from the hollow feeling in my chest. Something didn't add up. The email Madison had sent. It was too calculated for a rash mistake, but too sloppy not to have consequences. The next morning, a base-wide siren screamed through the hallways. I thought it was a drill until my phone lit up emergency protocol active. All high-clearance personnel report immediately. I dressed on autopilot. Muscle memory kicked in before thought. At the coordination center, a security officer handed me a slim file. Its contents, however, were anything but light. A breach. Highly classified intel from Operation Dagger. A mission I had led in Syria had been uploaded to an encrypted dark web forum just hours earlier. Worse, the data trace pointed to a dormant device, one that had once been assigned to me. It hadn't been used in years, but it was still embedded in the base's legacy systems. Within the hour, I was seated across from General Graham and two officials from Military Intelligence Command. They didn't say I was under arrest, but I knew they were watching my every breath. I didn't argue. I handed over complete access to my communications from the past 6 months. Still, something felt off, so I dug deeper. I reanalyzed the metadata from the email Madison had sent this time using strategic-level decryption tools. That's when I found it. The link embedded in the message had unknowingly triggered a dormant backup process connected to an old decommissioned server, one that had once archived classified mission data. That link had retrieved a hidden file unencrypted, and that file was the one now exposed. I traced the origin. The email was sent from a device accessed 2 days earlier, using Madison's credentials. Then I remembered she'd casually mentioned I left my laptop at the comms station overnight, forgot to lock it. I hadn't thought much of it then, now I couldn't ignore it. She hadn't meant to leak top-secret intel, but her actions, whether born of jealousy or carelessness, had sparked a wildfire I was now standing dead center in. I knew that if I didn't lead the investigation myself, I'd be left carrying the blame for something I didn't cause. So the next morning, I submitted an official request to General Graham. I wanted to head the internal inquiry. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. "General," he said, "the floor is yours." Our first meeting was held in the Strategic Command Room, a space I was once denied entry to for not having the rank. Now, I sat at the head of the table. Across from me weren't strangers. They were family. My father, Colonel Roy Walsh, retired, was tasked with combing through the old intel archives from his advisory clearance. My mother, a former combat medic with a specialty in biotrace forensics, would assist with forensic recovery on the compromised device. And Madison? She was assigned to map system access vulnerabilities. A task force, a family, and not a single person wanted to be there. No one made eye contact. Dad presented his findings in a flat tone, eyes glued to the screen. Madison spoke briefly, emotionless, like she was giving a status update on someone else's failure. Only my mother looked at me now and then, not with blame, but with a kind of quiet confusion. Like she wasn't sure what she was seeing. I wasn't there for reconciliation. I was there for clarity. And then, deep in the metadata and logs, we found something. The base's AI security system flagged an old file buried in a 2017 archive, a dormant Trojan embedded in a logistics file. It had never been activated, just sleeping, hidden. The year I clashed with Derek Glade, a senior strategist during the Mosul campaign. He wanted an aggressive sweep through a civilian zone. I blocked it. I demanded a phased containment. He saw me as a liability, and maybe back then he planted the seed of revenge, just waiting for the right mistake to trigger it. That mistake had been Madison. When I reviewed the Trojan's timestamp, everything came into focus, like a flipped-over battle map finally turned right side up. 2017. Mosul. Glade. Derek Glade wasn't just a strategist. He was a man who held grudges the way some hold classified files, quiet, sealed, and waiting. Back then, I had blocked one of his operations, a full-force sweep through a civilian sector filled with women and children. I chose a phased containment strategy. To him, I wasn't decisive. I was weak. He lost that battle. I got promoted. And I never heard his name again until now. Except this time he hadn't come with guns. He came with code and patience. Weapons of erosion. Madison hadn't known, but she had clicked the wrong link at the worst time. Her device had reactivated a buried protocol that triggered the dormant Trojan. Derek didn't need to break in. He just waited for one of us to trip the wire. That evening, my mother quietly handed me an old folder. "You left this during Operation Candlelight," she said. "I thought you were hiding. Now I think you were just surviving." I didn't respond. Not out of anger, but because for the first time I heard something in her voice I'd never expected recognition. Later that day, our trace system pinged an unusual login from a remote motel just outside Fort Ridley, paid in cash. Reservation name Derek Glade. He hadn't just orchestrated this from afar. He'd come back to the one place no one was watching, a decommissioned data relay room still wired into the old secondary net. We launched a tactical breach under emergency authorization. We found him mid-transfer uploading files. He didn't run, didn't fight. He looked at me and said, "Took you long enough, but it's too late now." He didn't need a scandal. He only needed doubt to let everything rot from the inside. And Madison, however, unintentionally, had given him the key. The next day, as the final report was being compiled, Madison submitted an addendum, something no one had asked her to do. In it, she admitted to initiating the chain of emails that ultimately led to the breach. Not out of malice, but from personal emotion. Jealousy, not betrayal. She accepted a formal reprimand. It would delay her promotion eligibility for 5 years. She signed it without hesitation. I didn't see it as a victory. I saw it as a quiet awakening, late but honest. At the final task force meeting, my father stood to give the closing remarks. He scanned the room, and for the first time, he wasn't looking as a colonel. He was looking as a father. He said, "I owe this entire team an apology, especially Emma. I let medals and pride blind me to what truly matters." It was the first time I'd ever heard him admit fault in a room full of brass. I didn't cry. Neither did Madison. But when I met her eyes, I didn't see the sister who had tried to erase me. I saw a woman learning to stand without needing to push anyone else down to do it. A few weeks later, I sent out 3 invitations. One to my mother, one to my father, one to Madison. The location, the old family home. The same one where I once slept on the couch after graduating West Point. This time I arrived first. I set the table, and I took the seat at the head, the seat that had always belonged to my father. When they walked in, no one spoke. My mother carried a casserole wrapped in foil. Madison kept her eyes on the floor. My father was silent as always. I began, "This isn't a dinner for apologies. This is a dinner for truth told from my own mouth." And I spoke of operations, of investigations, of the choice to stay silent to protect a system I once doubted. They listened. No one interrupted. I didn't need their forgiveness. I just needed them to know I was never gone. They just chose not to see me. A month after the investigation, I returned to Washington, D.C. No spotlight, no ceremony, just a woman with a briefcase and shoes worn smooth from walking through rooms where names are easily forgotten. I resumed my role as a part-time strategic advisor for NATO. Most days were spent analyzing conflict scenarios, writing reports, and supporting field teams in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia. I still lived alone, still woke at 5:30 a.m., still wrote in black ink on white paper, still didn't answer messages after 9 p.m. But one thing had changed. Once a month, I flew back to Fort Ridley to teach a specialized seminar soft strategy in non-traditional conflict. And Madison, she never missed a session. Front row, meticulous notes, asked the hardest questions, not to challenge me, but for the first time, to learn from me. After one class, she handed me a binder A proposal to reform officer training programs based on a framework I had once outlined. She said, "I don't need your approval signature. I just want to know what you think." I took it. Wrote one word on the cover, advance. My family wasn't a framed portrait anymore. It was a quiet kind of motion. My mother sent handwritten notes each month, usually just one line. "Are you eating enough?" My father had started introducing me differently. My daughter advises international strategy, not she's somewhere overseas. And the family photo on the mantle, I was in it. Not cropped, not replaced. Last week, a young cadet lingered after class, maybe 23. He asked me, "Ma'am, what's the hardest part of war?" I paused, then answered honestly, "Surviving without becoming a statue. Not turning your wounds into weapons." That evening, I walked behind the barracks. The sky dipped into orange haze. Madison appeared beside me carrying a small birthday cake. On top in blue frosting were 3 words: General, Sister, Teacher. I didn't need to be written into history books. I just needed to be seen by the eyes that once misunderstood me, and now finally understood.